A tree once harbored the oldest secret of the desert. For 4 millennia, its golden legumes sustained entire civilizations in environments where little else could thrive. However, in less than a century, it faced near obliteration, disparaged as a weed, incinerated, and eradicated from the land. Yet, beneath the surface, something lay dormant. This is the narrative of mesquite, the arboreal species that sweetened existence before the advent of sugar, and may hold the key to what lies ahead. Welcome to nature's lost vault, where the archives unfold in the Sonoran Desert, specifically Tucson, Arizona. Clay vessels interred 4,000 years ago held perfectly preserved mesquite seeds. Discovered by archaeologists in 1998, these seeds were still viable after 4 millennia. The people who stored them, lacking a written language, possessed an understanding that has since been forgotten. In a landscape where maize withered and rivers desiccated, mesquite consistently bore fruit, serving as a bastion of life. Its roots plunged over 100 feet deep, surpassing any well and enduring any drought. Scientists later ascertained that these roots could retain up to 600 gallons of water, sufficient to endure 10 summers. The fruit it yielded was a marvel of biological engineering. Each pod contained 35% natural sugar, complete protein, and soluble fiber. The air around a blossoming grove exuded a fragrance reminiscent of caramel and smoke. Ground into flour, it remained unspoiled for months. The Tohono O'odham referred to it as our sugar, while the Pima and Yaqui peoples alike recognized its immense value. For thousands of years, families collected the pods as they descended like rain, crushing them into a soft flour that nourished entire villages. When Spanish explorers arrived in 1535, they documented it with astonishment. Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca described pods whose taste rivaled pure honey. He observed families grinding them into meal, then baking them into cakes that sustained them through winter, subsequently dubbing it the Tree of Life. By 1541, another explorer chronicled forests extending across the Rio Grande, canopies so dense they created their own shaded ecosystems, with entire villages residing beneath their branches. The tree provided abundantly without demanding anything in return. However, the story subsequently took a darker turn. By the late 1800s, ownership of the land shifted. Ranchers, accompanied by cattle, cotton, and ambitions of conquest, moved in. To them, mesquite was not the tree of life. It was merely a weed, an impediment to profit. Colonists introduced sugarcane from distant islands, constructing mills and plantations, establishing systems of control. Mesquite, growing freely without irrigation or ownership, had no place within this new arrangement. Millions of acres were cleared, and trees were felled. Yet mesquite does not yield easily. Even when its trunk was severed, the roots persisted, silent and patient, lying in wait beneath the earth. They burned it to cultivate cotton and poisoned it for wheat, but the roots penetrated deeper than anyone had anticipated. Cut to the ground, mesquite regrew, producing 10 new shoots for every trunk removed. The United States Department of Agriculture, after decades of attempting its eradication, finally conceded in 1948 that mesquite was ineradicable. But beneath the surface, another narrative was unfolding. The tree was not merely surviving, it was regenerating the land. By the early 1900s, ranchers believed they had triumphed. Millions of cattle grazed where mesquite once stood, transforming wilderness into prosperity, or so they presumed. Within 2 decades, the soil fractured like pottery, rivers dried up, and the denuded ground was swept away by the wind. Cattle began to starve, and the very tree they had eliminated, the one deemed a pest, began to re-emerge. Ranchers labeled it the invader, though it had existed long before any fences or railroads. Then, scientists observed something unforeseen. Where mesquite reappeared, the soil transformed. Its deep roots extracted nitrogen from the air, a feat few plants can accomplish, returning it to the depleted ground. Beneath its shade, which cooled the earth, grass began to regrow, wildlife returned, and the desert started to revive. By the 1970s, ecologists bestowed upon it a new designation, keystone species, the silent architect of the desert ecosystem. Its pods became sustenance for deer, javelina, and coyote. Its blossoms nourished native bees, and its wood provided shelter. What the world had dismissed as a weed had all along been quietly restoring the land. Thus, the question grew more pressing. If a tree could survive every recorded drought and rejuvenate the earth beneath it, why did people ever abandon it? By the 1990s, the land itself seemed to demand its return. Droughts intensified across the American Southwest. Farmers sought crops capable of thriving with minimal water. It was then that scientists revisited the tree they had disregarded for a century. In 1993, the USDA initiated desert crop studies, yielding astonishing results. The flower contained 3 times more calcium than milk, and as much protein as eggs, all derived from a tree that required no irrigation or fertilizer. Concurrently, a peculiar hunger emerged. People consumed more sugar than ever before, yet also experienced increased illness. Global sugar consumption exceeded 170 million tons annually, and diabetes cases tripled within 2 decades. Physicians searched for natural sugars that could provide energy without adverse effects. Researchers then looked back to the desert. In 2005, a team at the University of Arizona discovered that mesquite's sweetness stemmed from fructosaccharides, plant sugars that nourish beneficial gut bacteria rather than elevating blood glucose. Mesquite pods possessed a low glycemic index, making them safe for individuals managing diabetes. A teaspoon of mesquite flour could sweeten coffee without causing an energy crash. It tasted of earthy caramel and smoke, a natural creation designed for balance. One scientist remarked, "It's the sugar that heals instead of harms." By 2010, health stores across the United States began marketing mesquite sweetener, proclaiming it the sugar of the future. Prices surged to $20 a pound, transforming an ancient food into a modern luxury. Chefs in Tucson and Santa Fe started baking mesquite bread and even crafting mesquite ice cream. The same fruit once proscribed by empires now adorned supermarket shelves alongside maple syrup and honey. However, the true rediscovery originated not solely from laboratories or chefs. It emerged from remembrance. Around 2012, a quiet movement commenced in the deserts of Sonora and Arizona. A small group of indigenous farmers, elders, and food historians aspired to revive mesquite from memory into tangible existence, calling it reclaiming the forgotten tree. Many still possessed ancestral seeds, safely preserved in jars for generations. Maria Lopez, a Tohono O'odham farmer, began replanting them in 2013, employing her grandmother's technique of burying seeds near dry washes where water once flowed. Within 2 years, her trees bore an abundance of pods. She noted that the aroma evoked memories of childhood mornings, when families roasted the pods for breakfast. What started as a small act of remembrance blossomed into a movement. By 2018, community seed banks in Tucson and Hermosillo started collecting mesquite varieties from across the Southwest. Some pods were red like clay, others pale gold. Botanists identified over 30 native species, each adapted to its specific corner of the desert. The world was recalling what indigenous peoples had recognized for millennia. Authentic sweetness does not originate in a factory. It grows quietly in the heat. By 2020, Discussions surrounding food once again shifted. Global droughts were setting records. In parts of California, farmland cracked, and wheat yields plummeted by 40%. Rivers that once sustained entire cities turned to dust. Scientists began posing a simple question: what survives when everything else fails? The answer pointed back to the mesquite tree. NASA researchers studying sustainable crops noted how its deep roots could extend up to 200 feet underground, accessing water beyond the reach of any other plant. One scientist stated, "It is less a tree, more a lesson in endurance." Governments began to take notice. In 2021, Mexico's National Forestry Commission launched initiatives to replant mesquite across 300,000 hectares of degraded land. And because the Prosopis genus, the mesquite family, thrives in arid regions worldwide, farmers in Argentina, India, and Kenya joined the effort. The Food and Agriculture Organization declared it a forgotten crop of survival. The tree that once symbolized resistance now serves as a blueprint for the future. Every pod, every branch, every root carries a reminder. The solutions to tomorrow's hunger may already be growing beneath our feet. This knowledge is not lost. It awaits our remembrance. If this vault has resonated with you, and you find value in these stories, please subscribe and activate the bell icon. Each like and share contributes to preserving this forgotten wisdom. Together. The next vault will open soon.